Oregon's got a week 3 non-conference matchup at home this year against the BYU Cougars, a game that cannot be overlooked if you're a Duck fan. So what might it look like if BYU comes into Autzen and pulls an upset? We'll ask a guy who knows a thing or 50 about BYU. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show. 5-star views on Apple Podcasts. We like those as well. I am joined today to preview a matchup with BYU, of course, by the host of Locked On BYU Cougars. His name is Jake Hatch. I went on his show a while back, talked about this matchup about maybe a month or so ago. And Jake, thank you so much for coming back to return the favor.
Absolutely, Spencer. Thanks for having me.
So going into this game, I feel like it's one where a lot of, maybe casual Oregon fans or casual college football fans will look and go, Oregon's better than BYU. And sure, for the last 15 years, Oregon's been a stronger program overall. Technically, we've only been a program for, 0 games at this point, at least that have been played. But you get what I'm saying there. But I feel like this is a BYU game that I can't shake from my mind about. That better not be a stumble. First time head coach, first time full-time play caller, new quarterback, a lot of young pieces, some question marks here. How do you feel as a BYU fan going into this game?
This is a game, if speaking as a BYU aficionado, this is a game for BYU to go in and potentially pick off Oregon simply due to the fact you just talked about. It's still a new era for the Ducks. BYU is going to be a very veteran team. I think most people out there, either they've read this or probably seen it, 19 returning starters for the Cougars this year, coming back from a team that was 10-3 a year ago. So it's a veteran-laden squad, a team that has experienced a lot of success the past 2 years. BYU the past 2 seasons is 21-4, folks. So they've won a lot of football games. They've learned how to win. Also, that's another thing about BYU. Early on in Kalani Sitake's tenure, they had a struggle in terms of finishing and winning games that they were in a battle for. They figured that out the past couple of seasons. So it should give BYU more than a fighting chance to go up there to Eugene and Autzen and win this one.
Yeah, and I tend to feel slightly more confident in any big game when Oregon has them at home. This is a big one. UCLA and Utah, also big games for the Ducks to have at home in 2022. But I don't count any of those, at least in my mind, as, write them off, guarantee wins, just because they're at home. I think they'll lose to the Utes again here in 2022 because I think Utah will be quite good. And that Utah BYU matchup, which I presume is on the schedule again this year.
It's actually on hiatus for the next 2 years. So,
oh my gosh, I thought that was a yearly thing. Is it real? That's a tragedy.
They've gone on hiatus for 2 years. It's going to be back on the docket in 2024, and it's supposed to be on the docket to the end of the decade at that point. But for the next 2 years, BYU gets to hold bragging rights after that win over Utah a year ago.
That's a calamity for college football fans. That's one of the best rivalries anywhere in the country. It's electric no matter which stadium it's being played at. But this is not a game for Oregon against BYU that they can overlook, that fans should overlook either. As you look at it right now, Jake, and maybe some of these opinions will or will not change depending on how the first couple of weeks of the season go, because we'll have 2 games on the resumes there prior to this week 3 showdown in Eugene. If BYU does go into Autzen and get a win, which is a very tough thing to do, but it has happened before in past years, especially to a team of BYU's caliber, what do you think it looks like? What are kind of the broad trends that you think play out for the Cougars to kind of stomp on the Ducks there?
Biggest thing for BYU is going to have to go in there and match Oregon's physicality. And that's something that BYU the past couple of seasons is really focused on, being a more physical, imposing team and impose their will on opponents via their offensive and defensive lines. The biggest thing for BYU in this game is I think their offense will have to carry them. BYU's defense had a pretty down year towards the tail end of last season. There were injury concerns that was partially to blame for that and some youth along the front for the defense. But BYU's offense this should be a game where they can go in and put up 30 plus points. That's the type of offense BYU appears to have coming back this year, led by Jaren Hall, their quarterback. So if they're going to go into Autzen and win this game, they may have to go in and win a little bit of a shootout where they just last Oregon in this matchup, because just as early as it is in the season, week 3, I'm not 100% convinced BYU's defensive issues they had at the end in last year's final 6 games will be fully fixed at that point. So it'd be more of a team where BYU's offensive line comes in and in theory dominates up front, allows a guy like Christopher Brooks, the grad transfer running back they brought in from Cal, to run on Oregon, control the clock, and then just get out of there with a victory. So it's going to be an offensively driven upset if BYU is going to pull it off, in my opinion.
Offensively for BYU, Jake, talk to the Duck fans out there watching or listening about the key players that they should expect to hear have their names called, as often as BYU would like, and as infrequently as Oregon fans would like, of course, but start at the quarterback position, of course.
Well, yeah, Jaren Hall is going to he's a returning starter this year. He started 10 games a year ago, had some injury concerns mid-season last year, but he passed for 2,500 yards last year. He's getting some early NFL buzz right now. Most Duck fans probably will recall Zach Wilson in the stellar 2020 season that he had. Jaren Hall was actually his backup that season. So he has assumed the position, has been very, very good. He is going to lead this BYU offense. He's got 2 very, very good receivers. One is Puka Nacua. Some Oregon fans may remember him from his stint up there at Washington.
Yep.
He's in a team with Gunnar Romney as kind of the 1-2 tandem at wide receiver. BYU's got 2 guys that I think are NFL tight ends in their future, Isaac Rex and Dallin Holker, who will be part of that passing attack. And then the biggest thing is BYU has a kind of a revamped running game. Tyler Algier sent the single-season rushing record a year ago before being drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. So they brought in Christopher Brooks, a former Cal Bear, to come in and be the guy at running back for BYU. He'll be running behind an offensive line that returned 7 of 8 guys who started games a year ago for BYU. So it should be an offense that it should be firing on all cylinders when they get to Eugene, barring something catastrophic injury-wise in the first 2 weeks of the season. So there's 4 names I would tell you to pay attention to: Jaren Hall, Puka Nacua, Gunnar Romney, and then Christopher Brooks. I think those are the 4. If you're a Ducks fan, you don't want to hear their names because that usually means BYU's either scoring or had a big play.
Do you watch New Girl, the TV show?
I do.
Remember the episode where Schmidt impersonates a Romney?
Yes.
Right as you said that, I was like, I wonder if that's Tug Romney's brother.
So Gunnar, the Romney family, his older brother Baylor was actually the backup quarterback a year ago behind Jaren Hall. It's Gunnar's older brother. That family, they're actually related to Mitt Romney's family distantly. So the Romney
Gotcha.
name, it is related. It's not necessarily like it's a nephew or a son-in-law, that type of thing, but they are related.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just thought of that and laughed. And
Romney.
I figure there are some New Girl fans out there. New Girl is a phenomenal show. One of my favorites. Real quick, but before we work in plug in one of our sponsors here, you mentioned that offensive line, which should be very good for BYU. Return that many starters. Oregon's in a similar position where they've got 5 or 6 guys back from a year ago that started games regularly. Just losing George Moore the fourth to at the NFL, got picked up by the Packers. But there was an offensive lineman who came to Oregon with a lot of hype, and it was during the Cristobal era, and we figured he would be the next big offensive lineman, and then he wasn't playing a lot. Now he's over with BYU. We'll just refer to him, or at least I will, as Kingsley, at the expense of sounding wildly insensitive and butchering his name there. I don't want to do that. But is Kingsley a guy who's going to fit into that rotation? Oregon fans will have to look at and go, oh yeah, that guy. Boy, I wish we'd kept him.
Yeah, Kingsley Suamataia is his last name. So for those of you Oregon Duck fans out there, that may recall, yeah, you can call him Kingsley. I understand that. He is a former 5-star talent, a guy who played in BYU's proverbial backyard, minutes away from BYU at Orem High School. He came back to BYU, and he's going to compete for a starting job this year. So I would count him. I mentioned there's 7 of 8 guys who started games a year ago for BYU. There were injury concerns on the interior of the offensive line that led to multiple guys starting games on the interior. The crazy thing about this is Kingsley pretty much slots in as that 8th guy, and I think a guy that can start if he finds the right spot and beats somebody out in training camp, he could be a starter come day one for BYU. He's that talented. The crazy thing about it is I think most people project him to play tackle at BYU. Right now, they have Blake Freeland at left tackle, who is being projected as high as offensive tackle number 3 in the NFL draft, according to some draft pundits. And on the other side, Harris LaChance is a multi-year starter at right tackle. So he's going to have to unseat one of those two guys. My thought is if he can't necessarily unseat either of those two, if I'm BYU, I kick him inside to guard for a year, let those two, when they're expected both to go to the NFL draft potentially after this upcoming season, you kick Kingsley inside to guard for a season and then move him back out to tackle in 2023. So the good news is Kingsley is going to battle for a starting job, and Oregon's loss very much was BYU's gain. I can tell you there are Cougar fans who are ecstatic to have a guy like that in Provo.
Well, there's tons more to get to here with Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars as we look to the Week 3 matchup between Oregon and BYU. But as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders, and LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. You get in there, post it, put a purple hashtag hiring frame, and then you let the applicants roll in. linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. We keep going here with Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars. So offensively, I want to touch on that a little bit more because I think defense is where Oregon has, I think, the most intrigue this year. There's certainly, question marks and things that Duck fans want to see offensively. Can we throw the ball to wide receivers more than running backs, as opposed to what was happening a season ago where Travis Dye was our leading receiver in multiple games? And can we push the ball down the field more, take some shots, create big explosive chunk plays? I think those are valid questions to ask. But what I'm curious to see is how Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy can improve this defense in year one, right? How quick can that turnaround be? Because I think you had some schematic shortcomings from a season ago. Oregon struggled to get off the field on third down. They were really, really bad. I think allowing somewhere in the mid 40s on third down in 2021. Someone can hop in the YouTube comments and put the actual stat there because I'm too lazy to look it up right now. But you get the point I'm making, which is they were not good on third down. They're very good on third down offensively, but that had to do with their play calling. I think they struggled with that defensively last year. So I want to see a guy like Lanning be able to make that step forward in year one. I think that's a reasonable expectation. But stylistically for BYU, what sort of offense should Duck fans expect to see here? We're familiar with Christopher Brooks. He was a rock solid, pretty grounded pound between the tackles guy with some sneaky speed when he was running for the Golden Bears. So a Power 5 capable back right there. But is he going to be a secondary option in the offense? Is it more balanced like a Utah, or what does Sitake's offense look like?
So BYU, since Kalani Sitake brought in Jeff Grimes, who's now the offensive coordinator at Baylor, he built this offense with Aaron Roderick, who is now the offensive coordinator, who succeeded Jeff when he left for Baylor. They built an offense that was, I describe it as multiple. They were just as capable of going 5 wide as they were lining up in an I formation and running it down your throat. They prided themselves on being able to do anything and everything they felt like they needed to do to be successful on offense, and they have kind of morphed this offense to fit the personnel that it works best with. With Jaren Hall as the quarterback for BYU, it's more of a shotgun set, so they don't really play under center a ton with him. They will do it in short yardage situations, that type of stuff, but he operates best a little more from the shotgun. But they pride themselves on being first and foremost a power run team. They want to control the ball, control the line of scrimmage, and control the clock, the time of possession. So a guy like Christopher Brooks, he was brought in ostensibly to run for 1,000, 1,200 yards. Running for 1,600 yards like Tyler Algier did a year ago is probably a bridge too far for him, but they expect him to be the lead guy. They expect it to be as balanced as they possibly can make it. They really like Jaren Hall and his play action ability. He does have the ability to push the ball downfield, and that's one thing that Aaron Roderick, when he took over as offensive coordinator, probably added to BYU's offense was his risk it for the biscuit type of mentality. He loves to go downfield and get those chunk plays. It's something that BYU fans were a little dissatisfied with Jeff Grimes as the offensive coordinator center is he wouldn't go downfield as often as Aaron Roderick will. So if you're an Oregon fan, get ready. A guy like Puka Nacua, on any given play, he may run a go route and they're going to run a play action and just let Jaren Hall throw it up to Puka Nacua, who's proven to be an incredible jump ball receiver. So they're going to be as balanced as they possibly can be. But if in their heart of hearts, BYU wants to first and foremost be a power run team.
I don't know how active you are on Twitter, but it seems like Oregon fans and BYU fans are ripe for one of those tweets that's like Oregon fans, BYU fans, handshake, wanting more explosive plays on offense, because that was just not there often enough with Anthony Brown a season ago. Let's flip to the other side of the ball and look at the defense, which you alluded to earlier had struggled over the latter portion of the season for the Cougars, which again was a 10-3 campaign. And if my memory serves correct, it was 10-2 and a loss in the I don't remember the bowl game.
Independence Bowl in Shreveport.
Independence Bowl. Who's the opponent there?
UAB, the Blazers.
Gotcha. So the defense was, I imagine, more the culprit as to why things, didn't go perfectly down the stretch, and you lose to an opponent like UAB, where at least on the surface, I would take BYU in that matchup, in theory, at least from a program tradition standpoint. So what has it been defensively, or what was it, I should say, last year over the last 5 or 6 games that caused the Cougars to kind of stumble? And that's Kalani Sitake's side of the ball, right?
Yeah, exactly. He is a defensive guy. He did it for 10 plus years at Utah and then a stint at Oregon State before becoming the head coach at BYU. So defense has been his baby. The biggest thing for BYU was the defensive line last year, where they had an entrenched set of starters that went through the 2018, 2019, 2020 seasons that were actually really, really good. 3 of them got NFL opportunities. They all graduated at the same time. And BYU essentially had to turn to a bunch of sophomores, some unproven juniors, and a lot of freshmen along the defensive line last year. And they started out the season okay. They had some veteran linebackers, guys like Keenan Peely and Peyton Wilgar, who helped out, make up for some of the deficiencies along the defensive line. But both of those guys ended up with season-ending injuries. It was Peely got injured in game 3. Wilgar got injured, I want to say game 8 or 9, and we're out for the season. And at that point, you really saw things really teeter and kind of go off a cliff with the metrics defensively for BYU. So the biggest hope for BYU is that the young defensive front, the extra reps they got last year, where they're essentially thrown into the fire, will pay off this year, where they will show some improvement. But their biggest weakness last year was rush defense. They could not get a push upfield to slow down teams. You were seeing guys get beat off the ball 2, 3, 4, 5 yards down the field. And when an opposing team can do that, guess what they're going to do all game long? They're going to run it on you. And that's what teams like UAB down the stretch, USC, BYU did win the game at USC on Thanksgiving weekend last year. But USC late in that game was really getting a strong push in the run game and nearly beat BYU. So the biggest thing is they've got to improve their rush defense. I'm not 100% convinced it'll be fixed in the early going this season by the time they get to Oregon there in week 3, but that is going to be like the chief thing. If they can improve their rush defense, it could be a much better overall product defensively for BYU.
Well, we're going to talk a little more about BYU's defense, and then I've got another question for Jake Hatch, the host of Locked On BYU Cougars. But if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. I know that my fellow Locked On host Jake knows this very well because there's a new flavor. It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. Built has done it. Again, all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, and it's healthy for you. Only 160 calories, a whopping 15 grams of protein. Go to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It's the perfect treat. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Yeah, you understand the Built Bars, man. They're no joke. Like, it is not just me saying something just to say it. When I say that they are in my golf bag, like all the time, they are fantastic. They're so fantastic. I don't go to the golf course without one because I don't always. It's just they're fantastic.
I've got them stowed around the house. I can tell you that much. They're just everywhere in my house. My wife.
Oh, I know. You can just grab it and you're like, oh, like that's a sweet taste and it's chewy and it's delicious, but it's also like it's not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not fluff.
No.
You don't eat it and you're like, oh, I didn't eat anything. I don't feel like I'm going to be full. Like, no, you're gonna get something there.
Mhm.
Okay, but back to the matchup here between Oregon and BYU. Defensively, you talk about the rush defense being a concern. Is that kind of a broad front seven issue, or is it specifically on the defensive line? Like, where do you see that being a particular weakness? Because I don't know if you remember from when I went on your show a while back, Oregon's offensive line probably going to be. It's the unit I have the least doubts about going into this year because they have so many returners and they were so good last year. How do you see that matchup playing out in week 3?
BYU's linebackers, Keenan Peely, Peyton Wilgar, Ben Bywater, who ended up with 100 tackles last year after the injuries to the other guys, they're going to have to back up this defensive line. My concern was it was just the defensive line itself was so young and so inexperienced that they were just getting beat at every level. And that is where you hope with just them having to face the fire a year ago. Some of the freshmen are now sophomores are juniors. Some of the juniors, the few juniors that were in that group are now seniors. You hope that they just made some improvement just getting that experience a year ago. It was not fun. Trust me, down the stretch, BYU fans were all over Twitter and social media just lamenting the fact that they couldn't slow down opposing rush attacks. So Oregon's offensive line, in my opinion, it should be a decided advantage for the Ducks going into that matchup on paper as it stands right now. I just don't think that this defensive line will be as polished as I think they might be come midseason, like game 6 of this year for the Cougars. So the bigger concern is on that defensive line. There are veteran linebackers coming back. Guys like I mentioned, Keenan Peely, Peyton Wilgar coming back off season-ending injuries. They should help improve the defensive output, especially in rush defense, because both of them are tackling machines. They go sideline to sideline and make plays all over the field. So that should help improve it. But you have to think that going into this matchup, at least the way it looks right now, Oregon's offensive line should have a decided advantage against BYU's defensive line.
How do you feel about the Cougars' pass defense on the back end with the secondary? Are there any concerns, or is that kind of the strength of the defense going into 2022?
I would say it's the strength. They have 2 returning starters at cornerback. They have a returning starter at free safety. They had a little bit of a rotating cast at strong safety, but there are, I think, 2 different guys at that strong safety spot that I think could lay claim to that starting job, and I'd be comfortable with either of them at that spot. They've got a solid nickelback group that they feel like can come in on those spread offensive looks when you have 4 and 5 wide receivers out there. So I think the pass defense on the back end should actually be the chief strength for BYU. And I know any BYU fan that happens to stumble upon this and listen to that is just thinking to themselves, how crazy is that? Because for years, BYU's strength was actually along the defensive front and their front 7, whereas the defensive secondary was their chief weakness. It's kind of flipped the table this year. And the biggest thing is I think that both of these cornerbacks, one is an Oregon State transfer in Caleb Hayes. I had double-digit pass breakups a year ago, and D'Angelo Mandel, who's a multi-year starter for BYU. They figure to help lock down opposing wide receivers and help BYU's defense hopefully commit more guys to that rush defense where they feel like they can go more one-on-one on the outside to give an extra guy or two to potential rush attacks. And if that works out the way that I think that they envision it working out, it should help BYU's defensive output as a whole.
As you look at this matchup with Oregon and knowing what you know about them, I'm sure there are areas where you feel like, oh, I think BYU could have a chance if it goes this way, but maybe less so if it plays out that way. If I asked you, which I will here right now, what is the thing that concerns you most about Oregon going into this game? And let's say you can't go with it's on the road at Autzen Stadium and what should be a sellout crowd, because that's of course always a concern. But for on the field results and matchups and such, what concerns you the most?
Biggest thing for me is this is a week 3 game, the week after BYU's home opener when they welcome Baylor to BYU.
Oof.
Baylor beat up BYU a year ago. It was a body bag game in many respects, and that is the concern I have, is that BYU will want to get some revenge on Baylor. They may expend some extra energy trying to get some payback for that loss in Waco a year ago, where at the same time, Baylor is a physical team, similar to Oregon. They've got a big bruising offensive and defensive line that is going to, I think, lay some wood to BYU. And that is my concern, that a week turnaround going from that matchup with Baylor and then traveling up to Autzen to play in Oregon could be a very tough turnaround for BYU. So that's my chief concern, is the fact that they may just be physically beat up after that week 2 game against Baylor as they get ready for Oregon.
What do you think is the most important stat in this game? Turnovers, rush yards, passing yards, total yards. Like what do you think is the stat that might ultimately define who wins or loses?
I'm going to go with time of possession. If BYU can go in and win the time of possession game in a matchup like this, I feel fairly confident in their abilities to spring an upset. And obviously, turnovers will always play a factor in any game because it's a weirdly shaped ball. We all know that it bounces weird, so you got to take care of the football. But I think if BYU could go in to Eugene and control the clock, control the game, win the time of possession battle, I think that may be the chief thing that gives them a chance to spring the upset.
What's your prediction right now before the season has begun? We're over a month away or so from the game, so you're allowed to amend it. We'll have you on the week of the game, of course, to talk about some of these things again and assess how each team has performed over the first couple of weeks. But right now, how are you feeling right now as a BYU guy?
I'm feeling fairly confident in BYU's ability, just with the fact that they've got 19 returning starters. As I said, this is a
That's a
program
lot.
that's won 21 games the past 2 years. They've learned how to win. There were many years, the first 4 years of Kalani Sitake's tenure, you could see them in these games. You're like, okay, they're battling, and then in the third or fourth quarter, they'd have a critical series of mistakes that would cost them the game. They have figured those issues out, and they have won a lot of games as a result. I think with the returning starters, all 11, by the way, on defense returning this year for BYU, it's 8 of 11 on offense. I actually really like BYU's chances. I think it'll be a tight one. I could right now, I'd probably say if you wanted me to give you a score, I'd say something like BYU 28, Oregon 24. That's kind of where I would set it right now.
Confidence from the Cougars over there in Provo, or are you in the Salt Lake City area
Uh,
specifically?
right between the two, essentially.
Right between them. Close enough. But his name is Jake Hatch. You hit him up on Twitter at Jacob C. Hatch, and it was great to have you on the show. We'll certainly do this again as we get closer to the game. But thanks for coming on and informing all the Duck fans out there about the BYU Cougars and what to expect there and what should be a really, really good college football game.
Can't wait, Spencer. Thanks for the invite.
I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.